Welcome to the Front Seat Life podcast. This is Jessica Butts, your host and CEO and creator of Front Seat Life, where I help you be unapologetically who you are in your life, love, and business. Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is Jessica Butts, your host of the Front Seat Life podcast. And today I have two separate individuals coming to you. I've interviewed two different people to really highlight this dichotomy of this week's episode, which is thinking and feeling. And this is one of the most interesting dichotomies because it is very gender biased as well as societally biased. So back in the 80s, John Gray wrote this book called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And unknowingly, I think he was really talking about this idea that most men, in fact, 66 to 75% of men are thinkers, and 66 to 75% of women are feelers. So as a psychotherapist, I've always been so curious, of course, about the other 25%. These are the marginalized people in our society, the people who end up feeling left out and different and weird and unusual. And why doesn't anybody get me? And those happen to be my two different guests today. So I'm going to first be talking with Lindsay Barr. She is a thinking woman, an INTJ. She is a client of mine, a friend of mine, and somebody I have grown to just love and admire. And she's going to explain her perspective on what it's been like for her to grow up as a thinking woman in our society. And then David Walthew, who's been on another episode before, I also interviewed him. And his is especially fascinating, I think, because he is a feeling man who has been in almost all of his intimate relationships, been with thinking women, and he was also raised by a thinking woman. And so it's fantastic getting his perspective on this. So I think you're going to learn a lot about your own type. You're going to learn a lot about opposite types. And I hope you come out, informed and educated in a whole new way. So enjoy. All right. Welcome, Lindsay. I just did a little intro with you explaining that you are coming on and going to be doing this for us. So thank you. Welcome, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, good. I'm excited too. So Lindsay is a client of mine who's turned into a dear friend, somebody I respect tremendously. She's out in the theater community, really educating people. Tell us very quickly what you do so that people can look you up.
Yeah, so I have a theater education and consulting company named ReTheater. We are a theater education and consulting company whose goal is to help inspire other people to make art that matters and to create art that matters. So we work with schools and community theaters and students, all about that. It's a lot of fun. I love it. Yeah.
Isn't it great? I mean, anybody who's listening, I'm sure is going like, how amazing is that? Like, who even comes up with that? So love you, Lindsay. Love what you're doing in the world. I love it, love it, love it. So let's jump into today's topic. So this is all about the thinking and feeling. So I've talked about kind of all of what that means in another episode, but it's really important for me on this podcast for people to understand in a relatable way what it actually means. And so I can always explain it from an educational standpoint, which is, semi-interesting, but I think it's so much more interesting to hear it from people who have actually lived it. So, Lindsay, your full type is INTJ, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so introverted, everybody, intuitive, big picture, weirdo, creative like me. She makes decisions with her head, so she's a thinker and only 25% of the population, and then a judger, which is like me, control freak, like we got to know what's going on. So love you for that. So, okay, so Lindsay, I'm just going to dive in. I want to know, and I want you to share with the audience what it's been like for you to grow up, as I like to call it, the other 25%. So whether in school or your family. So jump in. Tell us about this.
Yeah, so I didn't know what the thinking dichotomy was until we started to work together. And I vividly remember when you had me take my Myers-Briggs when we first started working together and being like, this is me. This is so crazy. And it made so much sense. So since we've done that, it's been like 5, almost 6 years. Mm-hmm. And I've gone and I've talked to my parents. And I think one of the biggest things is when I didn't realize it, I felt so out of place and like so misunderstood and so misheard. And I really didn't feel like I fit, and I didn't with my female friends a lot of the times because I just did not understand the idea of making decisions based on your feelings. Like I remember like when we would be like in high school, right? And some guy would like dump my friend, and then we'd all have to be like, oh my gosh, he's the worst person ever. And I'm like, is he though? Like, I didn't like you. It's okay. Like the world will go on. So I didn't always have, people didn't love that. And that's okay. And there's actually, it's really funny you mentioned this because when I was just home, I just got back this morning from Wisconsin, and I was talking to my parents about my personality type, and they read the whole like description and then they did their own type test.
Nice.
Yeah. And my mom read it. And I love my mom. She's an amazing person. As a disclaimer, she said, oh my gosh, now I realize why you never cried as a kid.
Yep.
And like how I felt like I would have to like beat you over the head in order to get you to cry. And that though, because she is a feeler, just made our relationship super tenuous. And my dad is a feeler, which is wild because he's a police officer.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So it was a lot of them. That's how they made decisions. So if I didn't react that way, it was really hard. And that was really hard as a kid because I was like, I don't understand. Like, and I felt a lot of times, not with my parents, but with my first company, especially, that I always had to be the adult in the room. Mm-hmm. And everybody kind of leaned on me in that way as well, because I always just made decisions from a logical standpoint. And that I hate that term. I never use that with my students now of you have to be the adult in the room, because that's a silly comment. And that puts a lot of weight on people who make decisions from a thinking standpoint as opposed to a feeling standpoint. So yeah, I just was kind of like a fish out of water a lot. I didn't really know where I was. Yeah.
Do you ever remember, I mean, those are great examples of like your mom saying that to you of like, gosh, I never understood why you didn't cry. So oftentimes thinkers and feelers have a hard time connecting. So there's that missing kind of piece. So what do you have an example or a time when you felt that way? And then I also want to know, Lindsay, how can people connect with you? What is that like for people to connect to a thinking woman?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. Those are both great questions. So I think I've been really lucky for the most part to have had my friends be very understanding, like the most supportive, loyal people ever, because wow, they are a bunch of Fs, like to the max, my girlfriends.
Yes, I know a couple of them.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So I think that honestly, probably the biggest time I had a hard time connecting with people is probably with my students. Some of my students. So I naturally attract young people in my work that are really analytical. That's just the work that I do. And so when I've had students that really did not think that way, that was it's been hard for me to connect. And I always like do a lot of prefacing of like, this because my face makes a certain, my kids always say I look like I want to like punch everybody when I'm watching them. I don't. I'm just thinking. So I'd have to do like prefaces like that, or saying things like, hey, I'm not a big like emotional person, like that kind of stuff. That's been helpful.
Yeah.
And also I think as a student, just I'm in the education world, so I always think like I had a really hard time connecting with my female teachers in school. Like I didn't connect with any of them except for one that I swear is a thinking woman. Like she has to be. And so I had a really hard time connecting with teachers because the idea of, oh, you're not going to do your homework, so I'm going to like publicly shame you in front of the classroom or that kind of stuff, which please never do. That's a horrible teaching tactic.
Yes.
Or that didn't ever appeal to me. Or like a teacher crying in front of their room. I was like, oh, I would like to go jump out of the nearest window. Thank you. Whereas most of my girlfriends, I feel like connected with certain teachers. We just butted heads all the time, which did make it hard. Like as a young person trying to find those role models. I know that's not a super crazy specific example.
Oh no, it's fantastic.
But yeah.
Fantastic. So give us feelers advice on how to connect or approach you, because we're having a conversation so that people can get it. Like I'm all about telling the truth. You know that about me.
Yeah.
sometimes when feelers, and again, this is all about putting your own oxygen mask on first. Like, let's, we got to have that conversation. Like, we're not judging anyone. The whole goal of this podcast, the whole goal of the books that I write, the speaking I do, my whole world is really about being unapologetically who you are, but also understanding other people. So this isn't about changing yourself and then getting over trying to change other people. But this is what we do as egocentric human beings, as we see people and think, why isn't she like me? Why isn't she smiling? Why doesn't she want to hug me? And so what we do, right, you're making a face, of like, we come at each other in this weird way of like, I need you to be like me, which is also just immature because it's also this validation. Like, Lindsay, I need you to hug me and talk to me and give me words of affirmation because that's what I need. But what do you need? And this is kind of going into, Gary Chapman's 5 love languages. And I'd actually like to know yours at the end of this. But how can we connect together? Because we are different people. It's about, again, knowing our differences and then learning how to connect with you.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it just makes me think of the time that I've been with you in the Front Seat Life group for the last 3 years, because it has majorly evolved. Like, I remember the first year you had me do we were going through the car and you had me sit in front of everyone. And one of the women was like, oh my gosh, you're thinking, this is all the things that I feel. And I have, she had a lot of negative thoughts that she kind of had about me. Not negative, but just misconceived ideas. And now I went in the third year and was like, hey, guess what? I am a thinking woman. Doesn't mean I don't have empathy or that I don't want to support you. It just means that I'm probably not going to be the best person if you just want to have a venting session of emotions. So I think the first thing would be that, like I said, I don't lack empathy. I'm a teacher. I teach empathy. I think actually being a thinking woman or just a thinker helps me be a better teacher and teach empathy because I don't let the emotions get mixed up in it. And I really challenge my students. There's never a time they can sit there and be I remember I'll have students say things like, I think feminism is stupid. And I never get angry, even though I think that's a crazy thing to say. And then I'll say, cool. So what are your thoughts on that? Tell me. And then I'm like, great. So you think it's stupid. So your homework for next week is to read these 3 articles, which shows why feminism is great. And then I'll have somebody else. So they have to have opposing views. They'll have to read 3 articles on that and the following week why it's stupid.
Great.
So they at least whatever. So I think that's one thing, just to know that I don't like empathy. I think the other thing is to realize I think this is a great thing in life is who are the people that you lean on in certain situations? If you want, I have a great friend who's in the group and this has been awesome for us because now when she has things that are hey, I need help logically thinking through this or brainstorming ideas, she comes to me because I'm great, say all of your emotional stuff and I'll help you sort it out and I won't get wrapped up in it. I think it's knowing who you lean on. If you need somebody who you are in that spiral of just wrapped up in your emotions, I'm a great person to just chat with. I think all thinkers are of hey, here we go. Now, if it's your spouse that's the thinker in the relationship, that might make you want to punch them in the face. And that's okay. But knowing that's helped my husband and I because he's also a thinker. And knowing okay, we're going to talk about emotions. We have to preface it with the other person. Don't fix this.
Yeah.
Don't brainstorm.
Yeah.
Just listen. So I think that those would be some things that are helpful.
Awesome. So I love this conversation because this is what we do as human beings. So we make up stories, right? So there's this, you've heard me talk about this a gazillion times, but I haven't talked about it on the podcast yet. There's this thing called the ladder of inference. And we climb up this ladder. We assume things. We make judgments, and we get to the top of the ladder, and we've built a story about other people.
Yeah.
And instead, my goal is instead of people making these assumptions, is just sitting down and having a conversation, getting curious, asking questions. And I think, Lindsay, the main reason I wanted to have you as the representative, if you will, of the thinking women is because you have so learned how to own it. She's talking about this Front Seat Life community that I'm a part of, and I run this, and Lindsay's a part of it. And she just, this third year, she just came in and was like, this is who I am. It doesn't mean I don't want to be friends with you. Come like me. I'm a super nice person. I'm just going to want to talk at a higher level or do some different things. And the ownership of who you are is also our responsibility. And I think we forget that in relationships. Is not only is it accepting the other person, but we have to know who we are, right? Like we've got to learn this shit about ourselves so that we can show up in a room like you did as an introvert of, 40 other people and say, hey, this is who I am. This is what I'm about. This is my personality type. This is what I'm good at. This is what I suck at. And now I can own it. Like not everybody is going to like us. We need to get over that. But the people that are, when we can own our own stuff, the right people can come, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. Times 1,000. Yes.
Yes. So I'm actually curious, do you know your love languages?
Yeah, I do.
What are they?
My first one is quality time, like huge.
Okay.
And then my second and third are acts of service, is like very close with gifts, I believe.
Okay. So I have a very unsubstantiated hypothesis that thinkers, one of their love languages, obviously this isn't like everybody, but I have a correlation between thinkers and acts of service and definitely feelers and words of affirmation, right? Like, just tell us how great we are and tell us all the things. And look at you, you're shaking your head like, please don't tell me all the things. Like, just shut up and don't tell me all the things. Just do stuff for me. So again, I have obviously never done any scientific research on this, but in my humble opinion, I do.
It makes sense though.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, because I hate, so I just turned 30 and I went home, I never do anything for my birthday. And this year everyone was like, let's celebrate your birthday. And I'm like, okay. And so I'm also adopted, and my birth mom threw me and my cousin, who's 6 days younger than me, a birthday party. And during it, I'm really good with my birth family when I don't have to think about the emotional side or the feeling side of things. And then as soon as that happens, I'm a nightmare. Not really. I just cry a lot. And so my birth mom, who's so wonderful and sweet, she goes into this whole thing of the day I was born and all this stuff, and how my aunt kissed me, and then she went into labor with my cousin, and I was like,
it's a lot of emotion.
And I'm like, these are a lot of statements being made, but not based in logic or based in anything real. They're all in emotion, and it makes me want to jump off of a bridge.
This is amazing.
I hate it. I used to hide in my first company when I would produce work. I would literally hide in the tech booth, which was above the theater. So I didn't have to talk to anybody after the shows, because there's nothing I hate more than people coming to me oh my gosh, that was such a great job. And it's not because I'm being a jerk or being vain or whatever. It's because it makes me feel so uncomfortable. Because I'm well, could you quantify that? How did you come to that idea?
Oh my God, I just laughed so hard into the microphone. I'm sorry, everybody, but holy shit, that was so good. And that's so funny, Lindsay, because I am such a strong feeler that after an event, if I don't hear from people, I get into my backseat, which is then this spinning of oh my God, nobody liked it. Everybody hates my guts. Oh my God, I'm ruined. This is the worst thing ever. Everybody hates me. I just go through this crazy cycle. So I almost stand around and oh my God, somebody please say something nice to me, because what am I going to do if I leave and no one liked it? Yeah.
Right. Well, and that's one thing, having worked with you so long, that I've come to know, especially once we transitioned from therapy to the group more, I was okay, Jessica, this is what's really important to her. So I will make efforts.
You're so sweet
to say that. But because if that's what's important to you and how that makes you feel useful and valuable, great, I can do that. It just takes a little bit more effort for me.
Yeah. And isn't this a wonderful, that is a perfect, I have one more question for you, but I feel that's kind of a perfect way to summarize this, is that just like the love languages, personality type, all of this, it doesn't mean that two different types can't get along. No. It means you have to make some freaking effort. And you just said it. You just kind of summed it up, that I want to, because you love me and care for me, and I think respect me, you want to make an effort, and vice versa. Totally. I know, okay, she's introverted and a thinker. She is not going to want all this huggy bullshit that I come at her with, and oh my God, this and that and whatever. I get it, even though that's what I want to do with you. I just want to hustle you and all of this stuff. And she does not want any of that shit. So she's please don't do that. It's all about learning this about ourselves. And so I think that's brilliant. I do want to end this with one more question, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot a little bit, but I'm guessing there are other thinking girls, thinking women, young adults listening that can resonate with this. They've probably felt similar ways. They've probably are like, what's wrong with me? So I wonder if you have some advice for them. And then I'd also love for you to tell them something positive about being a thinking woman, which I think you already did. You talked about being logical, but I know there's people listening right now, especially the thinking women that are like, I get her. That's me. Oh my God. I never knew that was a thing. So leave them with something. Give them, go for it.
Okay. It totally is okay. And I think it's a great blessing. I always believe that any adversity or anything that like makes you seem other in society is actually your greatest superpower once you learn what it is and how to harness it.
Yes.
So I think as a thinking woman, you should not, or even if you're a man who's a thinker, whatever, if you use logic in that way, you should never feel like other about it. All it can do is, if you think of it that way, is just hold you back. Like for a long time, forever, I used to be like, why can't I be more loving, or why can't I do these things? And like, I used to think I was going to be like a terrible mom, and I was always a terrible daughter and a terrible sister and a terrible everything, because I just didn't have that feeling side developed. And if you think of yourself, if you like give into what society says is normal and you have to prescribe to that, you're just going to be miserable. So, I think being a thinking woman has so many benefits. I said earlier, I think that it helps me teach empathy in a way that a lot of other people can't. Like, I can literally listen to a student go off on me. I've had this happen. A student went off on me for probably a good 30 to 40 minutes and tell me how I was a horrible person. I've had parents do that. Like, I'm just ruining everyone's lives, all these horrible, like I've had people say horrible things to me, but I ultimately in the end, if I can stay in my front seat, which is sometimes a trick in those situations.
They'll be learning about front seat very soon.
Okay, great. Yeah. So if I can do that, but I think it allows me to be able to look at them and say, hey, I hear what you're saying and I understand where you're feeling, but this is the logic of the situation and I'm not changing it. Like I've had like students who have, in my old company, I actually had to like let students go, and I had no problem doing that even up to a week before the show, because I knew I was like, I'm firm in my beliefs. And I know this will be best for the company. But then what was even crazier is because of that approach of the logic and the like calmness that I had, almost all of those kids returned. Some of them ended up like being super high up in the company because they're like, oh, you let me fail. I always say to them, this is the place to fail. If you're going to fail with me, because I will help you learn from it. Because emotions don't get mixed up. So I think that's like probably the greatest thing about it. And especially if you're a parent, oh my gosh, if your kids can have you parent from a point where your feelings don't get mixed up, and this is not a dig on people who are feelers, but like, I think as a person who grew up with two F parents, like, there was some times where it was really hard because I was like, this doesn't make any sense. And I think that can be a really strong point for you as well.
Yeah. So, I think I want to end on this, that we need our opposites. So as a thinking woman, you actually have a huge benefit in what you can give because you are different. And so as a strong thinking woman, I always need logical people. So my accountability partner for the last 5 years is a super strong thinking woman, because there's times where she just calls me out and she's like, girl, you are getting way too emotional about this, or you are like taking this to a whole nother level or whatever. And we need that logical side, because it's so our back seat. And so when we can come to people like you, or counsel, or look to you, or be friends, or any of that, it's okay that it's different. I think in our society, we are so wrapped up in being scared, right, of our opposite, instead of embracing it. And that word, getting curious, in graduate school, that was the biggest thing, is just get curious. I'm curious about you. Like, tell me about this. This is fascinating. Why are you different? How do you think this way? Like, I don't think this way, but it's okay. So tell me and help me and let me see things from a different perspective, because, as the listeners know by now, that, you don't do stuff that you suck at. And
No.
feeling for you, you suck at, and thinking for me, being super logical, I suck at that. But it doesn't mean I don't need it in my life. So when I can have people that are my opposites, and same for you, we can just see things so much more clearly from a bigger picture.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. This was exactly what I was hoping for, because I know how many, right? When you first learned this, how crazy this was going to be for you. So thank you. I really, really appreciate you being on.
Thank you for having me.
You're awesome. Okay. Thanks, son.
Bye.
This episode left you wanting more? Do you have questions for me? Are you interested in a community of like-minded people? Well, if the answer is yes, there is good news, because there is a community just for you for all of those things, and it's called the Front Seat Life Community. You can join for a very, very small fee, and we go live every single Monday where I answer your questions. We have a masterclass once a month with a team of experts from Front Seat Life, and we have community get-togethers. I do hope you will join me. You can learn more at a link below, and I cannot wait to see you in there. Welcome back, everybody. This is Jessica Butts, your host. I have the amazing and wonderful dear friend of mine, David Walthew, here with me. And for those of you guys who've been listening, I've had him on for every single dichotomy, because his relationship and my relationship have been so pivotal in my learning, his learning, my learning for my work, to be quite honest. And he's an ENFP, which is very rare in general, but even more rare for men. And so you have a really interesting perspective on a lot of these dichotomies. And so we just did an entire episode on the J and the P, which people are going to absolutely love. So go back and listen to that. But what I want to ask you now, and you and I had many conversations during our relationship about this topic. One in particular, I can remember walking around Green Lake in Seattle and having this conversation early on in our relationship, is that what it was like for you as a strong feeling man, making decisions with your heart, growing up feeling different. And not only that, but your mother was a very strong thinking woman.
Yes.
So logical, controlling. She was probably an ESTJ, we've concluded, and you're an ENFP. So everything opposite, except you're both extroverted.
Right.
So you grew up with probably what you're dating now, which is interesting.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So tell us, David, just share, if you will, what it was like for you growing up with a thinking woman and being a feeling man.
Well, I think my major relationships, in my life after that, my marriage, I was married for 15 years.
Yep.
She was the same 4 letters, which I should know by now, but I don't.
ESTJ!
So if I was Sigmund Freud or a dime store psychiatrist or something, I would say, dude, you're trying to get your mother. And I think part of that is you were a little bit different, but that you had similar traits to my mother.
Yeah.
Strong, powerful. I was drawn to that, not afraid of that, not afraid of strong. And in fact,
you're attracted to it.
Absolutely. And we shared in the last time, I've worked in cosmetics and in typical women's industries my whole career. So it's something I'm very comfortable with. But for me as a kid, I think I hid it a lot. I didn't want people to know how sensitive I was. In the 70s and 80s, the number of times people called me, you're a little gay kid. Oh. It was a different time, which I knew I wasn't, because I masturbated to Farrah Fawcett on the wall. I mean, I knew I wasn't. But because I was kind of led by feelings rather than reason or whatever, I can remember getting teased a lot for being sensitive. So especially during junior high school and high school, I hid that a lot and didn't let people probably know how sensitive I was. And certainly not my mother, who I love dearly and respect. And she's a wonderful woman, but she's not somebody I would say, Mom, let me tell you how I'm feeling. I really had nobody to really go to with that. Yeah. So, I think for me, I ate a lot. I was a fat kid. I really I never drank alcohol or did drugs, but I had a lot of hamburgers. I know that. A lot of hiding it. I didn't want people to know how sensitive it was. I will tell you though, is then as I got older and I recognized, I think this is something good for a lot of kids. The thing you think you're the most embarrassed about turns out to be your secret weapon.
Boom!
Like your secret.
Boom!
Like now, the thing I would think I would be, I didn't want anybody to know.
Yes, is your greatest asset.
By far.
Your greatest asset. Your greatest asset is all of it, the ENFP.
Yeah.
But for sure your N and for sure your F.
And my ability to feel somebody's emotion. If somebody's coming to, I manage the forest stores. If somebody walks, when they walk in, I can tell you exactly how they feel. I can probably tell you what their relationship with their parents were like. How are they feeling? Yeah. Oh my gosh, what was it like when you were 12 years old and your mother was 9? I can just feel their whole life when they walk in.
Yeah.
So this thing that I was always hiding and embarrassed about as I've gotten older in my career, it's my secret weapon. It's like the kids are like, I hate my red hair when they're 12. And then when they get older, oh my God, your beautiful red hair. It's
your greatest asset.
Yeah, exactly.
That is super, super powerful.
Yeah. A lot of hiding. And I don't know if it's different now. Then there was, a word that starts with F that somebody would describe a homosexual that we wouldn't say anymore. Yeah. I probably got called that word that starts with an F every single day of junior high school.
Yeah. And again, it's only been 30 years since then.
Yeah.
But my guess is that stuff is still happening. When I was a therapist, I would hear this a lot. I hear it in couples all the time. I also know that opposites attract in this way.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you're willing to share what it has been like for you to then be in relationship with thinking women. I was probably the only thinking woman or non-thinking woman. So your mom, your ex-wife, and your current girlfriend are all thinking women.
Yeah.
And so we are oftentimes, so I didn't ever do any stats on this, and I really wish I would have, that about 80% of heterosexual relationships were with their opposite. So feeling men would be with thinking women, which is unusual, but then feeling women would end up with thinking men, which is very common, very, very common. Yeah. 75% of women are feelers, 75% of men are thinkers. So that one's really common. However, when it got really interesting were the homosexual relationships. So gay or lesbian, the opposites were almost always, one was thinking and one was feeling, almost always. And it is just this fascinating thing where we are drawn to this person who completes us, yet it drives us fucking crazy.
Right.
They drive us crazy. So are you willing to share?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell us how that affects you now as like a grown man.
Well, I think it's like you said, I think the three big relationships in my life, and you being one of them, is strong. Mm-hmm. So I guess I identified powerful, strong women.
Yep.
We talked about this a little bit in the kitchen about your current relationship. That didn't frighten me at all.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of men, I don't want to generalize, but I think for some that would be, I think my mother always made more money than my father. Mm-hmm. My ex-wife made more money than me. And I think that didn't bother me. And I was drawn to the power of that. And I like that. And I think deep down, the only thing I want from those strong women is just that moment when they let the guard down. Yeah. And they let it down and they give me their gooey marshmallows inside just for a moment. Like, that's what I would just live for. And I think for me, that's what I was drawn to. I think, we talked about this in the last episode, I think some of it, now, looking as almost a 50-year-old man, is if somebody's going to know exactly when the light bill's due and the garbage needs to go out and what time is the insurance due and what time we have to be at mom's house for Thanksgiving, that takes a lot of stuff off your brain. Mm-hmm. And I think now I can look at, that's not really fair.
Yeah.
Especially when we had small children. I think about it now, it's like, she's got to work every day and go to work. And now she also has to keep all track of that. And to me, I didn't recognize it at the time as, that's going to be tiring and exhausting. And just equity, it's just not fair. I wasn't fair on that. Mm-hmm. And I think for those strong women, I think they were drawn to me because it softens their sharp elbows.
This is the thing. We are totally attracted to our opposites. When we're friends, we normally go out and pick very similar friends. In graduate school, we used to call it, you smell like us. Like you go out and sniff people and you're like, oh, you're like me.
Right.
We're going to get along. Let's be friends. But there is this weird, like caveman-esque thing that we go out and we look for our opposites to complete us. I'm using air quotes on a podcast, but it's this almost just sick thing that we go looking for these things that again are our opposite. Then, however, those are the things that end up driving us the most crazy.
Right.
I remember being a therapist and having thinking men in there and they're, feeling men with thinking women. And they just say, I just want your heart. I just want this sweetness. And then it's like, but that's not what you married. This person isn't you. And it's fascinating how we are attracted to our opposites, then we want to change it.
Yeah.
We're attracted but why aren't you like this? Why aren't you this way? Why aren't you that way? I mean, it reminds me of that movie, The Secret. It's like when you focus on the things that aren't good in a relationship and you focus on all of those negative things, they start to grow. And so, yeah, this whole thing of being kind of attracted to our opposites and then we get into a relationship and then we hate those things about ourselves. This whole podcast, all of this stuff that we're doing my hope is to help people see themselves for who they are because we do not change. We don't change.
No.
This isn't changing. You're not all of a sudden going to be a logical guy. You can still put these system, structure, singular focus into, your health and your fitness and all of that. But there's still this tendency of you of like, let's just fly by the seat of our pants.
Right.
And we have these tendencies and we have to understand them. And then we also have to accept them in our partner, which is not always easy to do.
Well, don't you think I think that moment when somebody loves you with all your shit. And the stuff that's wrong with you. And just like, listen, I still love you. I like you just the way you are.
It's so unusual.
Yeah.
Sadly, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, I'll be honest, it's pretty unusual in my life. I haven't had a lot of those.
Yeah.
Like, I just love you for who you are. Wow. I mean,
yeah. I know in my current relationship, and obviously like any relationship, we've had times where this issue has come up.
Yeah.
She's J.
And a thinker and an S.
And I'm a P. And there's been times where that's naturally is just going to cause problems. And I can remember arguments and, we disagree or whatever. And at the end, I can remember, listen, I want you this way. I need somebody with sharp elbows. I'm a big, mushy bear. Nothing's going to happen. We need some asshole who's going to drive this train. So don't change. Now you're going to drive me crazy and we're going to argue sometimes and this is going to be a thing. But I can't have you be like me. Yeah. Nothing's going to get done. Yeah. I need you like you. And if the consequence is sometimes we're going to fucking fight and bump heads, that's the cost. That's the cost of it.
Pretty perfect place to end. That was beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. This week's review comes from M. Hannon. Her subject line is brilliant! Exclamation point ×2. And she writes, I've never understood my actions and reactions more since listening to Jessica. My family thanks you for helping me see my backseat personalities and how they present themselves. My awareness levels and ability to diffuse negativity has grown exponentially. Thank you. And thank you so much. So don't forget, go over to my Instagram page, which is Front Seat Life. If you just heard your name, send me a DM and with your address and, oh my gosh, you just read my review on your podcast. And the team at Front Seat Life will be so honored and thrilled to send you some Front Seat Life swag. So thank you so much and keep up these amazing reviews so that I can thank you by reading them on air. From the bottom of my heart, truly, thank you so much for listening. I know that you have a ton of options, and the fact that you are taking time to listen to the Front Seat Life podcast means absolutely everything to me. If you're interested in learning more about the Front Seat Life way of life in the community, there's a couple ways that you can do that. First is always starting with your personality assessment tool. It's available on my website at jessicabutts.com. It's totally free, and it will help you figure out your personality type so you'll have some idea of what we're talking about. Next is if you're interested in hiring me for a keynote or some coaching or or strategy days or the fabulous and amazing Front Seat Life community. You can find out all about all of that at jessicabutts.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.